Hey guys, Sarak here, and I'm bringing you my budget branded DESPIA deck. So this uses a load of the new cards from Photon Hypernova and Darkwing Blast, but no Bystial Lubellion because that card is too expensive. But it does manage to fit everything else in for just over $150 or just under £150, which I think is very, very good for how close to complete this deck is. So let's get into it. We begin with 3 copies of Aluber the Boober of Duber. So, Aluber searches branded fusion. Shock horror. If it's normal or special summoned, you can add a branded. These are EU original print. They say DESPIA on, that is a misprint. It searches a branded spell trap from your deck to your hand. Then it has another effect, which you can only use one effect of Aluber per turn. You can, if a face-up fusion monster you control is destroyed, or leaves the field because of a card effect, while this card is in the graveyard, target an effect monster your opponent controls, summon this card and negate that monster's effect. So it gives you some effect negation, or it searches branded fusion, but not both. But obviously on separate turns, you can use the other effect. It searches branded fusion, that's the main thing you need to know. It searches branded fusion, and this deck needs branded fusion. Two copies of Dustbian Tragedy. Dustbian Tragedy searches Aluber, or ad libitum if you've got Aluber, which you usually do. If it goes to graveyard or banished by card effect, you can add one Despia monster from your deck to the hand, except itself, and then you can banish this card from the graveyard, target a branded spell trap, and set it to your field. One effect per turn and only once that turn. So again, this gets you the monster you need, and if you've already used that effect, then you don't get to recycle a spell trap, but otherwise, if you want to recycle a spell trap, you can do that as well. So very, very useful in the grind game. Obviously sets up things like ad libitum to revive a Mirror Jade, so you can use Mirror Jade's effect again, which is vital for being able to interrupt and break boards. One ad libitum of Despia. It has a niche attack gaining effect that doesn't really do very much. All monsters gain attack equal to their level times 100 until the end of the opponent's turn. And then if this card in your hand or field is used as fusion material, this is the far more important effect. You can target a Despia or level 8 or higher fusion monster banished in your graveyard, accept itself, and special summon it. So this allows you to use Mirror Jade multiple times per turn. You can banish something, branded in red, this plus Mirror Jade plus something else, make a Guardian Chimera, pop some cards, and bring back your Mirror Jade, which can then banish something else. So it's a very important card. It's very easily searched with things like Dustbian Tragedy, so you only need the one of. 3 Fallen of Albaz, with me flexing my one ultimate rare copy, the only OTS ultimate I've ever actually pulled. If it's normal or special summoned, discard a card and fusion summon one fusion monster from your extra deck using monsters on either field, including this card, but you can only use this card you control as material. So it helps break boards, but more importantly, it has the name Fallen of Albaz, which we would play this card even if it was completely blank. But it can be very nice to force out negates or break a non-negate heavy board if you need to, going second or turn 3 or whatever. We need 3 now because we go through these a lot more. We have a lot more pieces that require having copies of this in circulation, such as Cartesia. So we have to play 3 to keep those numbers up. Two Tri-Brigade Mercuria. Mercuria is a monster negate while you control a fusion monster that mentions Fallen of Albaz. And then if it's banished, you get to search a Fallen of Albaz or a monster that names it. So that gets you Springgan's Kit, Albaz itself, Albion the Shrouded Dragon, or Cartesia. Very, very useful. You want to banish this pretty much in as many of your combos that you can access it. And the fact that it's a hand trap as well is very, very nice for just stopping some problematic monster effects, because this deck does not have lots of negation. One Albion the Shrouded Dragon. This is just a free upstart goblin. It counts as albaz, so when it's in the graveyard, so it allows things like Cartesia to work. You can send a branded spell trap from your hand or deck to the graveyard, and then apply the following effect based on where you sent it from. So you can then place the this card on the bottom of the deck, draw 1 card, which is what we'll be doing most of the time. 1 Springans Kit. If you have a fusion monster that mentions Fallen of Albaz as material, you can summon this card from your hand, and then it searches Branded Fusion. Wow, lots of cards that search Branded Fusion. It's almost like Branded Fusion is necessary for this deck to do anything. But more importantly, it gets back cards that you've banished or have in your graveyard, and it's searchable, so we only need 1 copy. But remember, you do have to tuck a card back from your hand to use the effect. 1 Blazing Cartesia. This is the most expensive card in the deck. You have to run a copy. Fortunately, it's accessible by fusion deployment. So, if you control Fallen of Albaz or it's in your graveyard, summon this card from your hand. During the main phase, quick effect, fusion summon 1 level 8 or higher fusion monster from the extra deck using monsters from your hand or field as material. And then during the end phase, if a fusion monster goes to your graveyard, you can add this card from the graveyard to your hand. Very, very powerful. Can be summoned with fusion deployment because Granguignol lists its name. I apologise for my pronunciation of Granguignol. I have no idea if that's correct, and you're just going to have to deal with it. It's a light monster, which means it can make Albion. It brings itself back, which means you have it as fodder for fusing with, say, Branded in red. And obviously can then be used next turn as a fusion spell. It lessens your reliability on Branded Fusion going off because, again, it provides an extra fusion summon. So it's absolutely vital that you use this card. It is expensive, especially if you're in the US, but the deck still comes to around $150, £150, give or take, even with this card in. So please play the deck with this card. It makes it so much better. 3 copies of Bystial Saronir. Now, we're playing 3 of this. Most decks I've seen only play 1 or 2, but they have access to Lubellion. We do not. Lubellion is the searcher for Saronir, basically. But because we want to see Saronir, because it gives us a way of banishing Mercuria. So you can target a light or dark monster, banish it, and summon this card from your hand. You can then send 1 Bystial or Branded Spell Trap from your deck to the graveyard, except itself. So, because of that, this allows you to get Branded Retribution into the graveyard, which lets you add spells back. Then if you have copies of things like Branded Loss, or you can add back Branded in white, which gives you extra fusion summons, or add back Branded Fusion for plays next turn, add back Branded in red if you have no way of sending it... sending an Albion to set it in the end phase. The possibilities are endless, and I think that being able to see copies of Saronir is really, really important when we don't have access to Lubellion to easily place things like Branded Loss for extra searches. So that's why I've upped the numbers of Saronir. The other budgetary constraint we are doing is we're playing the Fright package. So we're playing 2 Edge Imp Chain. When it the attack declaration effect does not matter, does not do anything at all. We completely ignore that. All we care about is if it goes from the hand or field to the graveyard, you get to add a Fright card from your deck to your hand. We are adding Fright Patchwork. It also gives us extra discard fodder, it gives us extra fusion spells, it gives us extra dark names in hand. That's all we care about. We are never summoning this, we're never doing anything with this other than fusing it or discarding it to something like Lubellion. The other half of the Fright package is, of course, Fright Patchwork. Adds Edge Imp and Polymerization, so it's a +1. It gets us an extra fusion spell, which means we rely less on Branded Fusion. It baits bad players into ashing you early, which can sometimes just let you resolve a Branded Fusion to people who shotgun ash too early. And yeah, it just gives you lots of extra advantage, and this deck uses its hand very, very intensely. So keeping cards up in hand is very, very useful. So, on to the actual important spells. 3 Branded Fusion. If you know Shadow Fusion, you know Branded Fusion. You can use monsters from your main deck to summon any fusion monster that mentions Fallen of Albaz. And then it locks you into fusions. Okay, so again it says activate, so if it's negated, then you technically can summon non-fusion monsters, or if the activation is negated, you can summon non-fusion monsters. If the effect negated, like with an Ash Blossom, you can't. That doesn't matter, we're not playing any non-fusion monsters, but important to know. This card makes you go, does everything for your combo. You send whatever you need. You can send Tragedy for searches, you can send Mercuria, then banish it with a Bystial. You can send literally anything in the deck that you want. It's that good. But yeah, just remember you have to send Fallen of Albaz. And remember, it can be ashed. 3 branded opening. Opening searches aluber. Aluber searches branded fusion. Remember, branded opening discards as part of the effect. There is no cost to branded opening. So if it's negated, you don't discard. But because it's an effect, if you discard a tragedy, you get to search. Again, locks you into fusion monsters. And then also, don't forget its graveyard effect. You can protect a fusion monster from effect destruction, which can save you sometimes if you've got a big fusion heavy board and your opponent plays, say, a Lightning Storm or something similar. You just get to protect it with branded opening. So don't forget about its graveyard effect. 3 fusion deployment. This gets you search Albaz or Cartesia. You reveal a fusion monster in the extra deck and summon them from your hand or deck a fusion name that is listed on that card. And then it locks you into fusion monsters, which we don't care about. So fusion deployment gets you Cartesia most of the time. If you've drawn Cartesia, it gets you Albaz. Very, very simple card. Obviously gets you to Cartesia or Albaz. Means you rely less on your normal summon, so you can spend that normal summon on the aluber to search your branded fusion. Wow. Who knew that this deck was revolved around searching branded fusion? But yeah, it gets you Cartesia, it gets you Albaz. 3 Allure of Darkness. Pretty much 90% of this deck is dark, aside from Blazing Cartesia. We have multiple cards that care about being banished in Mercuria and Tragedy. And we also have multiple cards like Edge Imp Chain that we don't care about holding in our hand at all, and they are just there for extra fodder. So we can pretty much always resolve this, and if not benefit off it, at least go neutral off it. So being able to dig extra cards into the deck is very nice. Again, it forces out Ash Blossom from bad players, and stops them from hitting the branded fusion if they shotgun it. One branded in red. This is much easier to search now. We have Granguignol, as well as ways of adding it back with cards like Branded Retribution, so we only need 1 now. This makes Guardian Chimera. It allows you to fuse on your opponent's turn, it allows you to break their board, and then you get to bring something back if you used Ad Libitum. Just remember, you have to have a Despia or Fallen of Albaz in your graveyard to activate it. So if they have Crow or Call by the Grave or something like that, then it will not resolve, or rather resolve without any effect. 1 branded in white. This is an important fusion piece now, because we quite often use this to make things like Lubellion or Albion. Fusion summon a monster from your extra deck using monsters hand or field as material, including a dragon monster. You can also banish monsters from your graveyard if you use Fallen of Albaz as material. And then if it's sent to the graveyard to activate the effect of Fallen of Albaz, you can set it. Doesn't really come up. Most of the time we're dumping this with a Bystial, adding it back to hand with Retribution, and then using it to fuse something like a Lubellion. 1 branded lost. This prevents activations and effects that include the activation of cards and effects that include an effect that fusion summons a monster cannot be negated. Again, only stops activations. So you can still have your branded fusion Ash Blossomed under branded lost. It can't be Solemn Judgmented, but it can be ashed. Most importantly, if you fusion summon a fusion monster, you can add a Fallen of Albaz or monster that mentions it from your deck to hand. Again, this gets you Albion, Cartesia, Mercuria, or Springgun's Kit, or Albaz himself. Getting extra pluses off your fusion summoning is really, really good. We can obviously dump this with things like Bystials and then add it back to hand with Retribution. If we have access to branded fusion, we can easily search this with, say, Aluber or with Springgun's Kit. 1 gold sark banishes Tragedy or Mercuria from deck, which gives us searches. That's all we care about. It's a very, very easy way to get them out of the deck. It searches them, and then, yeah, we get to search off them. 1 Called by the Grave, because we have to stop Ash Blossom hitting our Branded Fusion. We know what Called by the Grave does. Remember, it lasts a full turn cycle. And it's more than just stopping Ash Blossom, but that is the prime thing that we will be using it on. 2 Polymerization as our Fright for Patchwork targets. Again, just having extra copies of Polymerization lessens our reliance on Branded Fusion, and therefore lessens our likelihood of losing to Ash Blossom. And finally, 1 Branded Retribution. We basically never use its counter trap effect. It hits an effect that special summons a monster, like a fusion spell. But mainly we're using this to banish it and then add back a branded spell trap. So this can be used to add back anything we've dumped there specifically, or it can be used to get back a branded fusion for the following turn, if we already have access to all our interruption. For our extra deck, we have 2 copies of Mirror Jade, Fallen of Albaz and a Fusion Synchro Xyz or Link monster. The biggest boy, 3k attack, can banish on with the stipulation that you can't use it the next turn. That is part of the effect, so if the effect is negated, like by Rindbrumm, wink wink, you can still activate it next turn. You still pay the cost, which is dumping. So you can dump an Albion, negate this with Rindbrumm, and activate it next turn and get to set your branded in red. Means you're not doing weird things like banishing itself to its own effect to summon it back. And remember, it also nukes the field if it leaves the field because of an opponent's card. 2 Lubellion, Dark Monster and Albaz, and fuses by shuffling back. Remember, you need to have a card to discard for this one. Other than that, it stops non-fusion monsters attacking, but it can't attack, sorry, and it stops you from summoning non-fusion monsters, which this deck does not care about in the slightest. But mainly, this is the one we will be making to fuse with. 2 Albion, it's Fallen of Albaz and Light monsters, and summons by banishing rather than shuffling back. We don't make this very often because Cartesia is our only light target in the deck, and we don't always want to use Cartesia in that way. We'd much rather make Granguignol or something similar. It fuses by banishing, so just be aware of that, and more importantly, it sets a branded card if it goes to the bin. So most of the time we'll be setting branded in red. Sometimes you'll set an extra fusion or something like that for use next turn, but most of the time we're going to set branded in red. 1 Rindbrumm. Rindbrumm, Fallen of Albaz, Beast, Beast Warrior, or Winged Beast, so we usually make this with Mercuria. When a Fusion Synchro Xyz or Link monster effect is activated, negate this effect, then you can return 1 monster from the field to the hand. The bounce is optional, so we get to negate our own Mirror Jade after dumping an Albion, and then we don't have to bounce anything. Or we can bounce something like a Bystial or an aluber or something like that, so we have it for next turn. Obviously, it can also bounce stuff your opponent controls if you're going second or you're leaving it on the field. So effect negation and removal is very, very nice. And it can also, during your opponent's turn, while this card is in the graveyard, target a Fallen of Albaz, special summon that monster or this card and banish the other. So if you have Fallen of Albaz, you can either summon it and fuse with it, or you can summon this for extra effect negation and a bounce. Remember, you have to banish the other one afterwards. Very, very strong. Enables a lot more combo lines now. Branded Fusion into this plus Saronir is incredibly strong. And that's why we are playing this card. 1 Granguignol, the Dusk Dragon. This is your fusion with Cartesia. When it's fusion summoned, you get to send a level 6 or higher light or dark monster from your deck or extra deck to the graveyard. So this can dump Albion, it can dump Bystial Saronir, or it can dump, say, your Albion from the extra deck as well, which gives you a search. So you get to search, you get to send, and then in your opponent's turn, if a monster is special summoned by a activated effect, you can banish this card from the graveyard and summon a Dogmatica, which doesn't matter, or a DESPIA monster from your extra deck. So this obviously enables a lot of Albion combos. It's the main fusion with Cartesia. It dumps things like Saradir, which allows you to use Retribution to add stuff back. One Masquerade helps you win in time, is nice and generic with the Despia and a light or dark monster, so most hands confuse this. In some decks this can actually almost functionally FTK them because they just cannot get enough effects off without burning themselves to death. Remember, it can also bring itself back if they control a monster summoned from a Ritual Fusion, Synchro, Xyz or Link monster while it's in the graveyard, but they won't have to pay the tax anymore. One Brigrant, this is just a send target, and again helps us with the ability to fuse stuff off albaz, but mainly this will be send if we need to search Mercuria. One Sprint. Sprint has a nice pop effect. If your opponent's got a floodgate or something that can't be targeted in a zone, you can move it and then pop that zone. And on the most of the time we'll be using this to send to the graveyard to search for Springgan's kit. Dustbian Proscunion, another nice generic Despian monster, can change attack of all monsters to 0, except level 8 or higher fusion monsters, can make it very, very difficult to run over. And then if it leaves the field because of an opponent's card effect, you get to add to your hand or summon one Fallen of Albaz or Despia monster from your deck. So it gets you to aluber, and that gets you to branded fusion, and that gets you to winning the game. One Guardian Chimera, newly reprinted as of Maze and Memories. 3 monsters with different names. Fusion summoned using only monsters from your hand or field, with at least one monster from each. If it's summoned by a spell card or effect, draw cards equal to the number of cards used from the hand, and destroy cards the number that your opponent controls up to the number you used as material from the field. While you have polymerization in the graveyard, it cannot be targeted. This is your big back-breaking play. Branded in red into this, using ad libitum, special summoning back your Mirror Jade that you used as material, getting to draw 2 and pop 1, or pop 2 and draw 1. And then getting another banish off Mirror Jade is absolutely phenomenal, and the fact that this card is now reprinted and much cheaper than it was is amazing for us budget players, so get your copy of Guardian Chimera. One Predaplant Dragostopelia, this card is just very, very strong for what it's worth. Once per turn, place a Predator counter on a face-up monster, and it becomes level 1 as long as it has a Predator counter. And then negate the activated effects of all monsters with Predator counters. That is a continuous effect, so as long as it puts the counter on something, it doesn't have to activate anymore. They've got the counter, their effect will be negated. And it's nice and generic, 1 fusion, 1 dark monster. So again, you can summon this off things like Fallen of Albaz, you can summon this with Branded in Red, and it just makes for some very, very nice disruption. And finally, one Dustbian Proscunion. This is for Granguignol to bring out as a big Chungus that they can't get over, and also does have a relevant effect. You can target a Synchro, Fusion, Xyz or Link monster in your opponent's graveyard, banish it or summon it to the field, and that's a quick effect. And then, if this card destroys a monster by battle, inflict damage equal to that original attack or defense, whichever is higher. So it wins you the game in time, and also provides you some graveyard disruption. So that is branded. That is a very, very long deck profile. I'm sorry it took so long. But the deck is much, much cheaper than it ever has been for as close to the optimal version, although I don't think there is quite an agreement on the optimal version. Main things it's missing are Lubellion, just a single copy, that's all you need, but it is expensive, and a Dragoon package if you want to go that route, which a lot of people are. But I hope you enjoyed the deck, and I will see you again soon. Thanks for watching.